From time to time, I am asked to present an abbreviated lesson that represents the biggest challenge I ever really face in preaching sermons, is keeping it short. After the lesson, and I believe after we wrap up the worship service, we're going to have a little presentation from Micah regarding the curriculum and the way the Bible classes are structured. And so I wanted to put together just a few brief thoughts to go along with what Micah is going to present and talk about the importance of teaching our children. This is something that is echoed in every page of the Bible, and every generation of the Bible that we read about, is how important it is for us as parents to take an active and leading role in instructing our children, helping them to become grounded in the Bible, helping them to establish a relationship with God and know who He is. Deuteronomy chapter 6 that was just read for us is the place I immediately went to as a starting place for this topic to consider. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, beginning in verse 4, it talks about how this is an everyday thing. Now, a point I'm going to make, and I'm not really going to make a lot of points this morning, just kind of one point, is that studying the Bible, instructing your children, sharing the scriptures with them is an everyday activity. What we do here on Sunday, what our children do at their Bible class, what they do on Wednesday Bible class, is a supplement to what should be going on every day. Deuteronomy chapter 6, it talks about how you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. And we know from Jesus in Matthew 22 and other places, this is the summary of what it means to be a follower of God, is to love Him with all your heart, to love your neighbor, and to treat others with kindness. And so following up with this idea of loving God with your whole heart, with your soul, with your might, it says in verse 7, you shall teach them diligently to your sons. Diligence means effort. It means persistence. Diligence means I am going to work hard at this. It is not something I'm just going to try a couple of times and then like a hobby, like golf for me. It's been 2 summers since I've actually gone golfing, yet I still tell people, oh, I golf, but it's a hobby that I picked up once or twice and don't do much anymore. That's not diligent. I'm not diligent with golf. I can't take that approach to my children. I have got to be diligent with them, and that's what it says here, diligently you shall teach them to your sons, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up, morning, evening, at the dinner table, at the couch where most Americans eat their meals now, in the car, on the way to school, over the weekend. That's kind of the modern translation there. Whenever, wherever you are, this is something you should be talking about with your children. It should be something that is just so conversationally familiar that your children aren't surprised when you say, let's talk about the Bible. It's something you should be doing often. And I love what he goes on to say in verse 8. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, meaning your faith isn't something you just turn on one day a week. Well, kids, now we're going to church today. I understand when people say that. It's not a saying or phrase. I throw stones at people when they say that. I say it too sometimes. But our faith should be more than just, kids, it's our day to go to church. This is something that doesn't depart from you. You bind it on your hand. It's something that you go and it goes with you. The idea of your God, your relationship with Him, your faith, your purpose and meaning in life. It goes with you everywhere, and that should be part of your relationship with your children. They shall be as frontals on your forehead, meaning when you look at me, you're going to see right there, as plain as the forehead on my face, you are going to see that I am talking about my God, that I am focused on my God, that it's not just something that I talked about on Sunday, and then by Thursday, I'm someone completely different. It is what you are going to see and recognize about me, and that's what it should be as parents to your children. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. And I know some folks here at this church that do this literally. You go in their house and you see scriptures printed and taped to the walls. You see people that have framed them and have them sitting on their shelves. I think that's an excellent idea. This doesn't necessarily have to be a command that we follow literally, but it's a good idea if we do want to follow that literally and literally write the scriptures everywhere and have them around our house. So this is what we are surrounded by, perhaps rather than TV. But if we read on through the rest of Deuteronomy chapter 6, I want you to jump down to verse 20. This is going to be another major theme of the Old Testament, the idea of when your children ask. Again, this hints at how we should be daily speaking about the scriptures with our children. That we have a daily responsibility to talk to our children and share the scriptures and use everyday activities or experiences to reinforce Bible lessons. Children, did you see what just happened? I want to share scripture with you that came to my mind because of what we just saw. Or you see a car accident on the side of the highway. Let's say a prayer for them right now. We don't know who they are. We don't know how serious it is. You see an everyday activity or an everyday occurrence, and you use that as a way to reinforce the Bible. When your children ask, verse 20 of Deuteronomy chapter 6, when your son asks you in time to come, saying, what do the testimonies and the statutes and the judgments mean which the Lord commanded you? We should have a good answer. When your children say, kind of to Zach's point just a few moments ago at the table, what does it mean to you? Dad, Mom, why do we eat a little bit of bread or cracker and have some grape juice? Why do we do that? What does that mean to you, Mom or Dad? What are you going to say to your children? Well, we ought to be talking about these things. We ought to have ready answers. And so I like this approach that what are you going to say when your kids ask you? What should they say when they ask them about the law? Well, then you'll say to your son, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and the Lord brought us from Egypt with a mighty hand. Moreover, the Lord showed great and distressing signs and wonders before our eyes against Egypt, Pharaoh, and all his household. And he brought us out of there in order to bring us in, to give us the land which he had sworn to our fathers. So the Lord commanded us to observe all these statutes, to fear the Lord our God, for our good always, and for our survival as it is today. It's not just we keep these commandments because God told us to, and we're afraid of God. The answer they would give their children would be very helpful, very instructive. We were slaves, and God set us free. And so we understand. We understand that listening to the voice of God gives us freedom, that it is for our good, that these are not just rules meant to make our lives boring. They had an answer that they would share with their children. In Exodus chapter 12, now this is from a timeline standpoint back a few years, but Exodus chapter 12, after the Passover, it was supposed to be a yearly institution. Every year, this memorial, this Passover would come up. And again, we see this phrase in Exodus chapter 12 and verse 26. And it will come about when your children will say to you, what does this rite mean to you when we have this feast every year? And again, that's a great opportunity to share with your children and say, we were slaves, but by the mighty power of God, he set us free. I also like that this is an opportunity for parents to share something personal with their children. I see a parallel with what we might share with our children. It's not just quoting memory verses necessarily. It's not just Bible drills or facts and information. I think this is a great stepping off point to say to your sons, to your daughters, here's what my life used to be before Christ. Here's what my life becomes when I don't listen to Jesus. Here's what he has done for me. To say, here's some of the mistakes I've made. I mean, our children should look to us and see wisdom. They should see experience. They should see a voice and hear a voice that they trust. But let's not fool our children into thinking we've never made mistakes before. Here's what Jesus did. Here's how he fixed the messes I made in my life. Here's some of the mistakes I made when I didn't listen to Jesus, and here's how I suffered for it. It's a great way to speak every day with our children. In Deuteronomy chapter 31, this is one of those points that might not mean much when you're reading through the text, but when you stop and think about it, Deuteronomy chapter 31, God through Moses made instruction and provision for a yearly assembly where they would come and or an annual or recurring assembly where the whole congregation of Israel would come to have the law read before their hearing. And notice what it says, Deuteronomy 31 and verse 10. Then Moses commanded them, saying, at the very end of 7 years, at the time of the year of remission of debts, at the feast of booths, when all Israel comes to appear before the Lord your God, at the place which he will choose, you shall read this law in front of all of Israel in their hearing. Assemble the people, the men and the women and the children, and the alien who is in your town, in order that they may hear and learn and fear the Lord your God, and be careful to observe all the words of this law. And their children who have not known will hear and learn to fear the Lord your God, as long as you live in the land which you are about to cross the Jordan to possess. He said children. Children are to be included in this. That doesn't sound like a lot of fun for a child to come with millions of people gathered in one place to hear the law read out loud. But specifically, Moses said, you're going to have husbands, wives, mothers, fathers, children, even foreigners that dwell among you are going to come and hear this, so that they will learn to fear God. It's not an easy task when we do bring our kids here on Sunday. The little ones, they fight us, they resist it. Little ones naturally want to be squirmy and noisy, and it is a struggle. But when I read this text in Deuteronomy, I believe it's a struggle worth fighting. I believe it's a good cause. When our children are young, they might not learn anything. They might not even understand the words that are being spoken. But they learn, mom and dad respect God. They learn that mom and dad take this assembling together seriously. As they grow older, we understand they might not always understand the scriptures, but we try and teach them to take notes or try and, talk about the lesson. As they grow older, we expect them to listen, and we want to ask those questions. What did you think of the lesson? What did you learn in Bible class today? So that we are taking what's happening here 1 or 2 days a week, and we're turning it into every day of the week, every day of our lives. And so I love that this idea that we're told to instruct our children at home, and we're to model for them, even here in the assembly, that we take God seriously. Proverbs 22 and verse 6 says, train up the child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. It's not always a guaranteed thing. The Proverbs also say that a kind word will dispel wrath or anger. That's not always the case, though. Sometimes you can be as nice and polite as possible, and someone's still going to be angry with you. But this is a general truth. When you teach your child and put them in the right path, they'll stay on that path. But I also like what it says in Proverbs 19 and verse 18. As we studied Ecclesiastes, we noted that youth is fleeting, means it passes and it's gone before you know it. For those of us with children, you look at your little 2 or 3 year old, my 3-year-old daughter, about to be 3 years old in a week or two, and I think before I know it, I'll be like Jeff and giving her away to some guy that thinks he's going to take care of her, and it's just hearing him give that toast at the wedding. I'm just like, no, don't talk about how she was a little girl and now she's getting married. I don't want to think about that yet, because youth is fleeting. It's gone before you know it. And I like Ty, by the way. I just a joke. But it's gone before you know it. Proverbs 19 and verse 18, it says, discipline your son while there is hope, and do not desire his death. Correction and training of children, it works better the earlier you start. And again, this is something that we can't just expect them to learn about God 1 day a week at Bible class. We should look at that as a supplement to what we're doing every day of the week. There are some things that Bible class can't accomplish, like correction. When your children do something that you need to correct them for or discipline them over, that's an instructional moment. But that's not something a Bible class teacher is going to do necessarily. They're going to share Bible stories, and that is a good thing, which should be a supplement to what we're doing. But that's one example of what a Bible class here on Sunday morning can't accomplish with your children. This idea of instruction, training, correction, and discipline at times. Proverbs 23 and verse 13. Now, don't misunderstand. This is not saying go beat your children or keep them in line by threatening violence. It's not what it's saying. But Proverbs 23 and verse 13. Do not hold back discipline from the child, Although you beat him with the rod, he will not die. You shall beat him with the rod and deliver his soul from Sheol, or from death. Again, I wouldn't say beat as in, beat them to an inch of their life or make them, in incredible pain, but he's just saying, if you correct your children, a lot of parents are like, my children won't like me anymore if I'm too hard on the rules. Yeah, but that's kind of the point of parenting, but they might respect you for it. You might save them from a world of pain by laying down the law or having rules and enforcing them. And again, that's something that has to take place every day of the week. Bible classes are great, but there are some things they can't accomplish. And this is where we have to be parents the other 6 days of the week, where we have to be training and instructing and correcting and disciplining our children while applying the scriptures, while helping them to learn these lessons. And I'll even go out and say there's some parts of the Bible that probably aren't, really appropriate for a Bible class at church. I would suggest to you Song of Solomon. That's one we recently studied. It's kind of a joke that if you don't volunteer to teach, you're going to be voluntold to teach the high schoolers Song of Solomon. Have fun with that one. But no, really, that's probably not the best book to study in Bible class. That's one, though, we kind of skip over it. I was curious when we studied Song of Solomon on Wednesday a few months ago, how many people had studied that prior, really given much thought to it. It's one of those books that we kind of ignore, but there is a lot of great material there that I think is best between parents and children. So there's parts of the Bible that are probably best handled outside of Bible class on Sunday. We have got to be parents teaching our children every day of the week. So what we're going to gain out of Micah's presentation is understanding what our children are going through, what they're experiencing, what they're learning, what their curriculum is like, so that we can reinforce that, so that we can incorporate what they're learning in their Bible class on Sunday, on Wednesday, into the other days of the weeks where we should be parents, where we should be teachers, where we should be instructing them, speaking about God. Sometimes we make this mistake even with school. I think homeschooling is excellent. I'm not sure if Jessica and I are up for it. We're considering it. But I don't mean to disparage public school either. But as parents, we need to understand we can't just pass off the responsibility of teaching our children wholesale to somebody else. It's not wrong to send them to public school. That's not at all what I'm saying. But we can't expect public school to teach them how to be moral and upright people. We can't expect public school to teach them necessarily how to budget properly. We can't get upset. Well, why didn't they learn that in school when they're our children? We need to understand, what are they learning at school? What's their homework assignments? Are they getting their homework done? Do you see how even in the school setting, we can't just be totally detached from it? We've got to be reinforcing it every day of the week. And we've got to be supplementing it, the things that they're not getting there. And that's the point I'm trying to make this morning as we're about to conclude the lesson with the Bible class that goes on here. It's great for children to be with their peers, to have material that is prepared well in advance, to learn these lessons and to get reinforced about Bible truths Sundays and Wednesdays. But let's not make the mistake of thinking they're getting everything they need in that 1 or 2 classes a week. We have got to be parents every day of the week. We have got to feel the weight of that responsibility that we are caring for their soul, and we have the obligation and responsibility to teach them. Now let's learn from Micah in a little bit how we can use the Bible classes here to help us teach our children. But let's be sure we're being teachers every day of the week. This hasn't been a lesson on how to become a Christian, and maybe you don't have children and you might not have felt this lesson applies to you much directly at all. But we're going to sing a song. Is it number 107? Number 107? And certainly this is an opportunity where we're gathered together as a spiritual body, a family. If you need prayers, need encouragement, if you have questions, you want to learn more about Jesus, you want to learn more about his people, more about his church, you need prayers or encouragement, any way we can help you to be closer to God this morning, we invite you to come forward as we stand and sing.